How y'all doing? My name is Robert, and today we are going to talk about Gradey Dick, the Toronto Raptors' newest member, the 13th overall pick, and probably the coolest suit at the draft, depending on what your fashion sense is. When the Raptors drafted Grady, I did not have the highest impression of him, to be honest. I'd watched 5 games, watched a couple of scouting reports, and I just didn't get it. I didn't understand it. And I've had a few hours to just sort of cool down, think about it a little bit. And I want to offer what I think is probably a slightly more balanced, nuanced, and hopefully more informed perspective on this before you know, I mean, this channel is not huge, but it's big enough at this point that if I become the source of misinformation or if I allow too much misinformation to spew out in this community, it does have a tendency to ripple out into the Raptor sphere. So I do want to make sure that I'm being fair across the board, that my takes are well researched. So, first, let's call it an admission. Didn't expect Gradey Dick to ever fall to 13. Just didn't see it. Didn't think about it. Just thought what he does is so important at the NBA level. There's definitely going to be a team above us that picks him, whether it be Washington, whether it be Orlando, whether it be OKC. There was just a lot of teams that could have used him, and I didn't see him falling to us, and it just wasn't talked about enough. And apart from the fact that, he's worked out twice with the Raptors, he came in for a second workout. I just didn't really understand the fit. I mean, he's not exactly the type of player that the Raptors usually pick up. And that's where I think I'm wrong. And so I want to talk a little bit about why the Raptors picked Gradey Dick. I want to talk about what he brings to the Raptors, what he could be like in his first year, why they probably really liked him, and maybe what he could do hypothetically, potentially, to overcome some of the glaring weaknesses that have become apparent as part of his game. So, first, let's talk about what they liked, right? Now, there is a immediate impulse on my end to think that this is a very reactionary pick, right? Um, Darko Rajakovic was a bit of a reactionary hire to some extent. A lot of people have described him as the anti-Nick Nurse. Well, Gradey Dick is like the anti-Raptor in terms of everything he does. He shoots well. This is a team that did not shoot well. Hang on, sorry, my lighting is really weird right now. I apologize. During our epic live stream, my precious nan light, which has lit me for the entire year of Pensari basketball content, went out. So I'm going to need new light. So I apologize if my lighting is a little bit horror film spooky here. Give me one sec. That is just slightly worse. Okay. So there was a feeling that did they just go for the most obvious fit? Like you never want to pick for fit here at 13. And obviously it was very much pining for one of the players who went right behind in Jordan Hawkins or Kobe Buffkin. And one of the things that I've noticed with the Raptors is they really do care about measurements, throughout the years, whether you're talking right back to the dreaded player that we shall not mention, Bruno Caboclo, 2 years away from being 2 years away, or OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam. The analytics and the measurements for these guys were always off the charts. Lately, I've noticed that big playmakers are a trend in the NBA. This is the type of player that the OKC Thunder really seem to value. It's the type of player that the Utah Jazz seem to value. And it's the type of player the Raptors and perhaps also the Orlando Magic tend to really value. And it's big playmakers. So initially when Grady was drafted, there was a lot of talk about Tyler Hero. And I want to talk about why that might not be super accurate. I'm going to do a cross comparison of the analytics for Tyler Hero, Gordon Hayward, Gradey Dick, and one other player, I believe, Klay Thompson. And we'll just take a look at how these players stack up. I know it's pretty tempting because Grady is a white North American player to compare him to every other white North American player. Oh, he's like Luke Kennard. He's like this. He's like that. But when I heard Bobby Webster talking about him something that immediately struck me was he talked about him being a good defender, or at least a smart defender, or someone who could at least make up for things defensively, a cutter, off ball playmaker, a rebounder, a better athlete than people give him credit for. Right after our live ended, I started texting my friend who, there was like a 50, 60 messages on Instagram, and I just wasn't paying attention while I was doing the live. And one of my friends who messaged me is someone who played against Gradey uh, once this year, and once in high school. And he said, "Y'all are gonna like this one. He's a lot bouncier than you think." So, again, watching 5 games. Now, I often chastise people for just watching YouTube highlights. I did not dig into Gradey Dick as much as I dug into some of these other prospects. I just didn't. And I don't think 2 hours is enough. I'll have to do more. I'll have to watch him in summer league. And I promise you that if I see more, my opinion will consistently change. Like, there's just certain things that you just can't see in a 5 game sample. I know that 2 of the games that I watched, he really, really struggled to get open. And so if that becomes the formulation or the basis for your entire projection of a player, then that's disingenuous, right? 5 games is not Gradey Dick's career. He's had a high school career that I did not see. He's had, he's had so much more than what I saw. So I want to talk a little bit about what I saw and what I've gleaned over the last 2 hours. Number one, he's a little bit bigger than I thought. I mentioned in the live that he was 3 inches, bigger than Jordan Hawkins, but I just want to show you the measurements because I think that it is worth noting. So Cam Whitmore, this hyper athlete, right? He's such a big athlete. Look at Cam Whitmore and Gradey Dick right next to each other. Cam Whitmore, 6'5", 7'5" in shoes. So Gradey Dick's half an inch taller than him. And in terms of wingspan, right, Grady's got him beat. So Grady's got a bigger wingspan than Cam Whitmore, the hyper athlete, the super defender, right? Now, if you want to compare this to players like Tyler Hero, it's not even close. And take a look at this. So Tyler Hero measured in at 6'4" without shoes, and he had a 6'3" wingspan. So, like, when we compare him to a Tyler Hero, it is quite crazy because Grady's just a bigger player across the board. Now, one of the things that often gets lost with wingspan is we often look at wingspan like a ratio, and I don't think we need to, right? Wingspan is far, far, far more a relevant factor when it comes to NBA players, when it comes to undersized players. So, for instance, when you look at a Davion Mitchell or a Donovan Mitchell or a Marcus Smart, maybe not so much Marcus Smart. You look at a Drew Holiday, look at a Dwayne Wade. You look at players like this who maybe don't have ideal height for their position. Well, defensively, you want to ask to yourself, do they have the ideal length to compensate for the height? And so if you have a player like, I don't know, a Donovan Mitchell who measures in about 6 foot, 6'1", and you don't see him as a point guard, well, then you want to make sure that he has the wingspan to compensate for the lack of size. And in some cases, he'll have a 6'10" or 6'9" wingspan, and you'll say, okay, he'll be able to compensate for his height. Grady's got plus size for a wing. At 6'7.5", he's taller than OG Anunoby. He's almost as tall as, I think he might be taller than Scotty Barnes. I mean, in terms of how Scotty measured at 6'7", right, without shoes. Grady's just as tall as Scotty Barnes. That's pretty crazy. It'll be interesting to see them standing next to each other because I've always suspected that Scotty was actually closer to 6'8", 6'8.5". But I mean, he's close. He's close to the same height as a guy who has occasionally played center for you. And ironically, when I was looking at some of his measurements, his wingspan and overall size profile is actually not that different than some guys who are being, picked as solely 3/4s. He's taller than Jarris Walker. He's almost as long as Jarris Walker. Jarris Walker is supposed to be a DPOY candidate who was a lottery pick. So I think that, when they talk about big players, big wings, plus size at the wing position, there's a couple of things that come to mind. So, one, it's about kind of what we saw with Fred VanVleet, right? This entire year. Sometimes when you break your guy down and you get into the paint, all of these swarming hands and these guys with their arms up, and you just want to say, where are your eyes, right? I think this was such a big appeal of someone like Cade Cunningham because Cade was supposedly 6'8", and that was just everything that any scout that I could talk to in 2021 could talk about. It's just like he'll be able to see over the defense. He'll be able to see over the defense. And you look at a guy like Luka Doncic, and Gradey Dick is a little bit taller than Luka Doncic, and you see how he's able to sort of punish defenders by just seeing right over them. Because if he's got a guard on him, he'll be able to see over him. He's about 6'7". So taller playmakers are something of a thing in the NBA, and it's a very plus thing. Now, I do want to reference the comps here. So this is very interesting. I'm comparing him to three players, and I think that I think this is worth noting. Okay, because there's been talk about, he might have more to his game, might have more playmaking to his game than we realized. So I want you to look at the assist percentage here, as well as I want you to just look at the win shares per 40. And then these are three players that I just decided to compare him to, right? So the first player obviously is Gordon Hayward. The second player is Devin Booker. No, wait. Is it Devin Booker? I think it is. I believe one of those players is Devin Booker, and then Tyler Hero, and then right at the bottom, it's him. So Devin Booker, 15, 16. I mean, honestly, it's shocking to me that Devin Booker played that long ago, but yes, it's true. And so when you look at the box plus minus across the three players, it's clear that Gradey is the worst in terms of like overall impact. Defensive box plus minus, he ranks worst. Offensive box plus minus, he ranks worst. Win shares per 40, he ranks worst, right? Usage, he ranks just the lowest. Steal percentage, he's the highest. Assist percentage, he's the lowest. And in total rebound percentage, he is also the highest. In terms of three-point attempt rate, he is also the highest, and I think that's worth noting. A large percentage of his shot attempts this year were off the catch, and in transition, his shot making is so much better than what I saw in those 5 games when I started looking at some of the second spectrum stats, which I'm sure like over the next few days at some point I'll have some time once I'm done with the editing assignments that I have that I've been putting off as we ran up into the draft, and I'll be able to just talk a little bit more about some of his situational stuff. So how does he really compare to two players? I mean, these are all three incredible players. Tyler Hero is a max contract guy. Devin Booker is an all-star superstar, depending on how you look at it. Gordon Hayward is a max contract guy. These are all lottery picks. All of them. All of them were late lottery picks. So where he compares favorably, I think he is probably the second best rebounder in this bunch. The best rebounder, of course, being Gordon Hayward. Now, you can make a case that Butler didn't necessarily play in the strongest conference. Gordon Hayward was a little bit older, fine. But I do think that it's encouraging that his rebounding percentage is good. Like, it's overall like really good. His playmaking, this could be a function of role, right? At Kansas, he was playing with a lot of upperclassmen. They were a really good team, and he was just sort of asked to fit in. I can't remember Devin Booker's Kentucky team off the top of my head. But the lower usage role and the correlation to assists percentage is right up there. Of these three players, obviously the most natural playmaker at the college level was Tyler Hero. But I think it's worth noting that, development is a thing. And, if Devin Booker has become like close to a primary playmaker and Tyler Hero has become nearly a primary playmaker for the Heat, then is it possible? Is it possible that Gradey Dick could at least become a secondary playmaker for the Raptors? I think it's possible. I think it's certainly possible. I think his 3-point attempt rate is the most encouraging part of this. I think his statistical profile is overall good. The steal percentage is great. I mean, it shows because he is the biggest of these three players, and that's probably what is worth noting. Gordon Hayward was 6'7" with a 6'7" wingspan. Gradey Dick is 6'7" ish with a 6'9" wingspan, and I think that the couple of extra inches are going to make a really big difference because, guys, Gordon Hayward has occasionally played 4 at the NBA level. So, yeah, as I look at this and I'm just thinking about it more and I'm like, what did I miss with him? I think I just missed the size. I had an assumption that he was 6'6" with a 6'7" wingspan, and just reading it 6'8", 7'5", and I know that some people are going to say this is arbitrary. It's 2 inches. Basketball is a game of inches. This is not a lateral athlete. This is not an athlete who has a ton of burst. But he is a decent athlete. Like, you saw him put the ball between his legs. I mean, this is not a non-athlete. This is not Luke. I mean, I don't say Luke Kennard's a non-athlete, but this is not your typical, like, when you look at him, this is not the guy who moves necessarily the way you think he's going to move. I think that his transition stuff is real. And, there's something to be said about the physical development. When you saw Gordon Hayward at Butler, I mean, he didn't look anything like the Gordon Hayward that you see in Boston or in Charlotte. He's obviously gotten a lot bigger. He came in a lot skinnier. But I wonder if he is the least physically developed in terms of strength among those 4 players. I would love to see it. So then that comes down to, okay, well, how much will additional strength and conditioning help him? Just as an athlete, how much can that help his defense? How much can that help hide him? Because, if you have a half decent standing reach and you have a half decent wingspan and decent size, you can be hidden on a multitude of defenders. I think what's important here, however, is the physics of how he gets his shot off at that size, with his shooting, with the way that he moves off the ball. I think he'll be able to get open a little bit better than I was expecting. Again, a lot of this will come down to system and fit, but I think that the comparisons to guys like Duncan Robinson and Kyle Korver are mistaken, because those are very much standstill shooters. They're not motion shooters or movement shooters. The way this guy could pull up, like, just dribble, down the court, speed up the court, and just pull up logo threes or, 32, 33 feet and off balance stuff, it's highly impressive. I know a lot of Raptor fans were really pining for Keontae George, right? I think if you are a Keontae George fan, I think there's a lot of that same stuff in Gradey Dick, and it's not as obvious because I think Keontae just dribbles the ball a lot more, and he's definitely got a much bigger bag and a handle package and stuff, but that's not necessarily to his benefit, because if you can catch and shoot the way that Gradey can, and if you can clear up and you have enough space to rise over a defender with 2 dribbles, you don't need 18 dribbles to do it. His paint finishing is going to be a concern for me until, and again, look, his paint finishing could get better just with more strength. Like, we don't know that, right? More so than anything, what has swapped me on Gradey Dick is just him. Listening to him, listening to more of his interviews over the last 2 hours. I've had a chance to really listen to him a little bit more. There's the one player that I stopped at one interview. I was just done after one interview. I was like, I don't have enough time. And just listening to more of his interviews, listening to, more about how he grew up, his relationship with his father, his relationship with the game of basketball, overall his work ethic, his work regime, how he sees himself, what type of player he sees himself as, how he models himself. there's always a concern with, people from Kansas, like how are they going to, adjust to a really big city? Are they going to be homesick? And you just get this feeling that this is a guy who's just going to adapt really well. He talked openly about, some of the teasing that naturally, Raptor fans, just get it out of your system now. All of the dick jokes, just get it out of the way right now. He talks a lot about, going into rival stadiums and seeing, derogatory signs and stuff. And he genuinely laughed it off. Like, he didn't laugh it off like nervous laughed it off. He laughed it off, laughed it off. This seems to be the guy that just does not give a shit. And I mean, doesn't give a shit in like the best possible way, doesn't give a shit. Like, there's a steely sort of focus to him. And I can see why the Raptors were super impressed. I think that he's going to get along phenomenally with Scotty. Like, I'm not surprised at all that already is a thing and they're already talking to each other and stuff. I think this is just such a seamless fit. When I listen to him talk, when I listen to him, when I'm watching him do his, funny little TikToks and stuff, I'm just like, this is a guy that Scotty is just gonna vibe with so hard. And one of the most natural synergistic fits with Scotty was Armani Brooks. I just always loved how those two played together. Armani was a guy who could catch and shoot, and he was a guy who would relocate and move a little bit like what Gradey Dick does. And I mean, obviously, this is just a much different player, a much bigger player. Um, but I genuinely feel that this might be a player who's a little bit more athletic than people are giving him credit for right now. He might be a player who can eventually, if he gets his strength and conditioning up, he could be a better defender than people are giving him credit for. And, with the track record that Darko Rajakovic and Jama Mashalela have for player development, especially, with Darko's track record of developing wings who maybe come in as shooters, but not much else. I think he already has a little bit else. So I don't think it's like you're trying to develop playmaking skills from scratch. I think there's some serious like feel, IQ, touch, awareness, IQ, just general like wherewithal about him. Like, he seems like a really smart player. And I try to avoid, using that as it becomes a blanket statement. Oh, this guy's got high IQ, this guy's got high IQ, whatever. But I watched another game that I hadn't watched, and I just focused on him for a quarter, and I think he scored only 2 points, but I just saw how he was doing all these small little things, how he would cut back door when his defender would lose him. And I was just like, you know what? With better players, with big playmakers like Jakob Pertl, with screeners like Scotty and Jakob, like, this is a guy who could easily find himself into, 20 point per game territory within a couple of years. So honestly, I'm not willing to give this grade like an A plus or an A minus just because, he was mocked higher and boom, he went 13th and he was the best player available. I still think there's a solid chance that Kobe Buffkin or someone picked after him is better than him. I just think that if I had to do my big board again, I don't think I would have him 18th or 19th. I think I would have him 14th or 15th. And looking at those measurements again, I think that I wasn't properly factoring in how small Brandon Pajinski measured. Um, I think it'll matter for sure, for him, because for some reason I thought Pachimsky was like 6'4.5", 6'5", and he measured in a little bit smaller, and his standing reach was even worse. So, I mean, just to put this into perspective, Jaime Jaquez, who's a power forward, small forward hybrid, has about the same physical profile as a guy that you drafted to be your shooting guard / small forward. I think there's something about big playmakers that is just, it's so appealing because the potential is so tantalizing. And if they can bring his playmaking up a little bit more, if the dribble creation can come up a little bit, um, there is still a very real chance and a pathway to becoming an all-star for Gradey Dick. I didn't see that potential when I was watching him the first time around. I thought, okay, great, the Raptors got a role player who's going to be a fourth starter. I'm not saying he's going to be an all-star. Please understand that. I'm not saying that he's going to be an all-star. I'm just saying that if everything hits for him, he has that kind of upside that he could be a 2-3 time all-star. So, you know, um, did the Raptors see a little bit of, Gordon Hayward, Franz Wagner? Did they see that in him, right? Neither one of those guys are world beaters defensively. Did they see a little bit of Tyler Hero? Or do they see something even more? Do they see a Devin Booker or a, Desmond Bain? Do they see a little bit of, gosh, again, I mentioned in the live, one scout I talked to said you're going to see a little bit of Drazen Petrovic in spurts with him. And it's just sort of like this gunner. Look, as a basketball player, I often admire people's jump shots or criticize people's jump shots. I'm not a trainer, but I have a good eye for what a great jump shot looks like. This is what a great jump shot looks like. I know he missed that shot right there, but this is just a player who has this like effortless release. So much of watching Scotty develop as a jump shooter is trying to get the motion down to minimum, right? Like you want to get it to a point where it's all connected and absolutely effortless. And the way that he gets his shot off is totally effortless. And that has significant, and I do mean significant impact down the line, because when you are that effortless as a shooter, it tends to add a little less variance to, fatigue, etc. Yeah. Again, there are a couple of really effortless shooters that I remember watching, in the early 2000s, Reggie Miller, Peja Stojakovic, right? These are just guys who just had this like very natural extension on their jump shot. And, you wonder, right? Because a lot of the things that we're saying about Gradey Dick right now, narrow shoulders, maybe not strong enough, maybe not athletic enough, maybe defensive liability, etc. I mean, these things have been said about a lot of really great players in the past. I mean, these are the same things that were said about Reggie Miller. It's the same things that were said about Steph Curry. So look, like, shooting is always a skill that is of high demand. If this is a guy who can be NBA ready-ish within a couple of years, I can tell you right now that, a player like this at his max upside, like if he maxes out upside, he's a max player. Because, we saw what a muted version of this, like a standstill shooter like Duncan Robinson, got $90 million. And no one said very much when he was signing that deal. I mean, they say stuff now because he hasn't performed up to it, but shooting is so valuable. And I think just his positional fit and just his personal fit with this roster was probably too much to pass up on. One thing I will say about Jordan Hawkins, and I mean, I remain very, very bullish on him, and I'm very happy that he went to the New Orleans Pelicans, because I think that he'll have like a real pathway to getting minutes there after CJ McCollum moves on. But he is 21, right? He is 21. He is older. He's had more experience. Gradey was way better as a freshman than Jordan was. So if you believe that had he gone back next year, that he could have been even better than Jordan Hawkins, again, strength, conditioning, getting older, you grow into your body. Your body's not done growing at 19 years old. It's so hard to project at 19 what a guy's strengths and weaknesses are, what they can and cannot do with some NBA conditioning, training, experience, etc. So, it's a touching story, right? He talks about how being one and done was a goal in his life, and that he'd written it down every single year. He and his dad, they go through this list, and they made a list every single year of things that he wanted to do, and going one and done was his thing. So, it sounds like a person, who else makes a lot of lists and, knocks them out? Scotty Barnes. I think they're going to have a lot to talk about. I think they're both kind of quirky, weird guys. I think they both have big smiles, and they seem to be like really good vibes. So, look, I think Bobby Webster mentioned it in his little post-draft presser that they wanted unselfish guys. They wanted team first guys. They wanted guys who were happy to be here. They wanted guys. And look, like, all of that's nice. And if you believe that he has great upside, great. If you believe that he has the most upside of any player left on the board at that point, and that's certainly possible, then great. I would hate to think that this was a reactionary move based on how the team played last year, that, you make this trade because, you make this draft pick because you didn't have this type of player last year. You didn't necessarily, shoot well from field last year, your field goal percentage, 3-point percentage. You're overly concerned with, your lack of shooting because of Jakob and Scotty and Pascal. And so you everything just leans into, this is a reactionary move. But if he happens to be the best player on the board and he just happens to fit all of these other boxes, then I think that's great too. I'm looking forward to seeing him in Summer League. I expect a player like this could do really well in Summer League. But I tell you, a lot of the, let's say the interview check boxes that I look for, which is congruency and coherence of body language, confidence, self-awareness. He checks a lot of really, really big boxes. So, look, I've never been, I'm not someone who flip-flops in terms of like right away. Like, for instance, we drafted Ed Davis. I didn't get it then, and I never got it. I never like flip-flopped on that. I didn't understand the Terrence Davis thing. I just didn't. Oh, sorry, not Terrence Davis, Terrence Ross. I didn't like the Terrence Ross pick when it happened. It was very firmly for Harrison Barnes. When Harrison Barnes went off the board, I didn't know what to make of it. Terrence Ross came out of nowhere for me, and I don't like it. I was always for DeMar DeRozan. Nothing that I saw from him in Summer League or, in his rookie season with the jump shot, et cetera, moved me off of that. And I was for Andrea Bargnani. I wasn't for, I wasn't for Charlie Villanueva. I've been for Scotty Barnes through it all. I've been for Christian Coloco through it all. So, once I get a really good feel for a prospect, once I've watched enough of their tape, once I, get a good read on them as people, I tend to stick with them. I feel that I don't want me reacting to this pick to become like, that's how I felt about it. Honestly, I think it's more of a statement about how much I was disappointed that we didn't pick Jordan Hawkins there. But given the gap in height, if the entire thought process there was, hey, neither guy's a super athlete, neither guy's a super playmaker, they're both move-in shooters, why don't we take the younger, bigger one? If that is the thought process, then I understand. And I hope that Jordan Hawkins will be really good for the New Orleans Pelicans. But, as a Raptor fan, I'm hoping that Gradey Dick will be just a little bit better. Okay, I'm going to get to 29 comments here, and then we're going to call it a night. Okay. K Money said, I don't hate the pick. Don't understand what direction we're going to. Are you in Africa right now? Because it'd be hard to believe you're up at 5 a.m. on Canadian time, bro. Yes, like this video for the algorithm gods. Very talented indeed. He's going to play behind OG. That's the thing. The positional versatility thing that the Raptors talk about all the time. They want guys who can fit into 3, 4, ideally 2, but maybe even 3, 4 positions. And they like that sort of flexibility. It seems like everything the Raptors do is like to maximize flexibility. And I think Gradey is a guy who can start for you. Maybe, if Gary Trent has moved on, maybe this is a guy who can start, ceremonial token starter, gives you 20 minutes a night, doesn't kill you, gets him a lot of reps. I think he could be a backup 3, a backup 2. I think when he fills out, maybe he could be a backup 4. It's not like he doesn't have the size to play small ball 4 at some point down the line. So I think this gives you a little bit of positional versatility. And weirdly enough, this fits Vision 6-9. I mean, it's the silliest thing because we're so used to Vision 6-9 being like these really long, sometimes just these really long athletes. But you don't realize like this kind of fits with what the Raptors have been doing. It just so happens, that he can shoot. So anyway, Canadians gonna love him for sure. I mean, sure. Why are there 4 ads in the same video? Like we're 17 minutes into this video, I got 4 ads. All right, congratulations, Ball's Life. All right. Fred's gonna hate this guy. I think he's gonna love him. Like he just strikes me as a guy that nobody hates. Like that's the vibe that I got. That's the message that I got. Like everybody really likes the guy. He's really quirky. He's really weird. He's really funny. Um, he keeps things light. He's not afraid to laugh at himself. I think these are all really, really good qualities. Um, I think sometimes you just have to ask yourself the question, would you hire him, right? Would you want to work with him? Just sounds like, a really good kid. Seems like a really good kid, really well raised. So good vibes indeed. Anyways, I hope this can raise the optimism level in this community a little bit. I obviously, I'm not holding my breath for him coming out and being first team all rookie or anything like that. But he has a really, really, really NBA ready skill right now, which is the shooting, right? So if he can find a way to stay on the court defensively, if he can find a way to not make too many mistakes on that end, I don't really see why, he can't get 20 minutes a night for you. So my projection for him here are my projections. I'm gonna end it on my projections. Okay. I think he'll get so my projections for Scotty in year one were a little bit low. I said he'll be able to play 25 to 30 minutes for you, that he'll average at least 10 points, boom, 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 whatever, and then he averages 15. So Scotty exceeded expectations. Hopefully he can do the same. Okay. I think he can average around 20 to 25 minutes for you next year. I think he's going to fit that much of a need. I think he can probably average 8 to 12 points per game next year. And I imagine that by year 4, he will be a permanent starter for this team and averaging anywhere from 15 to 20 points per game, with hopefully some decent playmaking and half decent rebounding. You look at a guy like Gary Trent Jr. and you say, what's that one thing missing from his game? He doesn't rebound the basketball and he's not much of a playmaker. So if Gradey Dick can be a bigger Gary Trent Jr., because Gary's not like a super long athlete either, right? He's about 6'5" with a 6'8" wingspan. So, he's not overly bursty or athletic. And despite what he looks like, he's not, so if he can be a bigger Gary Trent Jr. for you, if some of the self creation stuff can come along, some of the, 2 dribble ISO stuff can come along, maybe a little bit more playmaking, be just as good as Gary on defense. I think that would be a really low benchmark to set, but I think it's also pretty attainable because he's longer than Gary and he's a little bit bigger than Gary and he's just about as athletic as Gary, man. So I just think like this is a guy who maybe, just maybe, fits that need, and then also like he has a lot of that off ball cutting stuff that Gary maybe doesn't have. I wonder if at some point he can get his strength up so they can finish. So yeah, I think that I'm not projecting all-star. I'm not projecting okay, he's Reggie Miller, Klay Thompson, Devin Booker, etc. But I think the floor is incredibly high. I think his absolute floor is a 20-minute per game shooter off the bench who gives you half competent playmaking and some off-ball cutting. I think his upside is a 2 to 3 time All-Star. That's where I'll be on him. If I had to do my big board again, I think he would be like 13th to 15th. I think he would be in that range. The more I see of him, the more I like him. And I just keep liking him. Like everything I see of him is like, how did I miss this? How did I miss this? And I've addressed my biases with players like this before. I do have biases. I really, really, really like long, athletic, twitchy wings. And, sometimes, and I don't like undersized shooting guards. There's like player types that we all gravitate towards and maybe have preferences towards. I think Keontae George is exactly the type of prospect I usually miss. So we get better. I'll get better. I certainly wish I had him a little bit higher than I did. But yeah, I think this will be a good one for the Raptors, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in summer league. Anyway, He can rebound. Yes, he can. Absolutely. Otto's not even 30. He gonna get minutes before this Gradey. Yeah, they don't play the same position. You can play Otto 4-5, right? 3-4-5. You can play Gradey 2-3. Um, you know, I think a lot of people are a little bit confused that the Raptors didn't go for a point guard. I think this signals that they, like I, believe that Scotty is a point guard. A lot of people felt like, hey, how are you not going for Jalen Hood-Schifino or Kobe Buffkin? Easy. I mean, Scotty is your point guard. And if you believe that Jeff Doughton is a good enough backup, or if you believe that Fred VanVleet will be back, I don't necessarily think point guard is as big a fit or big a need as people thought it was. So, imagine a backcourt of Scotty and Gradey Dick. That's a very interesting backcourt. I think they'll struggle defensively, but no. So that was the thing. So in the 5 games that I watched, the reason that I wrote him off was because he just kept getting burned on pick and roll. That was my thing. Bobby said he wants him to come off the bench next year. I mean, these things are fluid. They can change. If you trade Gary Trent Jr., how do you replace the shooting? Maybe eventually you replace Fred's shooting and spacing with Gradey Dick. They're going to use Scotty like a Jokic type. Wow, right? First of all, a huge compliment for Scotty Barnes. They could, but I think this offense was always going to be tailor made around Scotty at some point. I'm just interested to see if they'll do it next year, if they'll do it the year after. So, yeah. All right. Hopefully, over the next, I want to say 3 to 4 days, we have some more clarity on free agency, Fred's free agency, Pascal's trade candidacy, etc. I did find myself arguing a lot today for Pascal Siakam because I had some friends messaging me saying, he's worth this and he's worth that. And I'm just like, bro, he's worth so much more. He's worth so much more. So this is kind of a weird stance for me to be taking where I'm just saying like, yo, I'm not saying he's first option, but stop acting like he's a bum. He's not. If Fred gets a new contract, when's the earliest you see him traded? So here's a complicated thing. I'm not going to really answer this question because I really have no idea. I mean, they could trade him as early as the trade deadline. I wonder if Pascal Siakam basically kiboshing any trades is a means of keeping Fred's offer on the table, right? Because if Pascal just simply says, I refuse to extend with any other team, you're not just going to send me to Portland or Atlanta and then, get something for me. He's talked about it before. He's talked about his feelings about DeMar getting traded. Anyone can get traded, et cetera. It's a business, et cetera. And he doesn't like that. So the question then becomes, if Pascal gets traded, what happens to Fred's offer, right? You pretty much enter a rebuild. If you're trading Pascal, you're probably trading him for young players and picks. So do you want Fred VanVleet on a rebuilding team? I think the offer goes down to some extent. So I wonder if Pascal, it would be more open potentially to trade talks and trade discussions once Fred VanVleet has secured his bag. Because despite what people think, Pascal has a serious amount of loyalty to Fred VanVleet. They have a symbiotic loyalty to each other. So they're going to be in tandem on this one. And so if trading Pascal hurts Fred's, I don't know, market value or hurts his free agency value, I don't think he's going to be necessarily jumping over that to help you out. So, yeah, I think it could be. Still want a better center than Yak, man. Dude's a stiff who can't shoot. I don't think he's a stiff, but I'll agree with you that he can't shoot. And look, you might have one on the bench in Christian Coloco. Just have to wait a couple of years. Pascal Siakam is mid. He can't win without someone like Kawhi. He hasn't done anything. He's very inconsistent and not clutch. I totally agree about the not clutch part. I don't necessarily agree about the inconsistent part. He's been pretty consistent. And in terms of, Pascal Siakam can't do anything without Kawhi, well, the year after Kawhi left, the Raptors had a better record. They were on pace to have a better record than the year they had with Kawhi. So, and that was with Pascal Siakam being the first option. So when people say like, oh, if he's a first option, you're a 41-win team, I beg to differ. I think you have the right shooters around him. If you're another team, maybe you put him as a second option. I think you have a 60-win team with him. I have some negative feelings if Fred gets over 25 million per season. I don't necessarily agree that 25 should be the panic mode. I think the panic should come at 4 years. So if they can get him for 3 years, and if it's 28, 29, even 30, I'm okay with it. It won't be a great contract. It won't be a value contract. It'll be a, you did us a favor, we'll do you a favor type of contract. So, but it'll be movable at the very least. I think it'll be movable at 30 million. It would be movable. Yeah, his playoff splits are not encouraging, but as a second option, he was dynamite in the playoffs. Maybe 385. 385, 390. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, especially if that final year can be partially guaranteed like Chris Paul's deal was. And you can sell it to him and say, look, like, this is just an insurance for us. You're an undersized point guard. Undersized point guards do have a tendency to break down. You haven't exactly been healthy. People don't talk about Fred VanVleet's injury issues, but he has been unhealthy on and off for 3 years now, or 2.5 years now. So it's been a constant battle to keep himself healthy. And we can talk about, back, this, that, whatever. But he had a lot of rest games this year. He, had a slew of injuries the previous year, kind of capped out in the playoffs. These don't just get better. I mean, they tend to get worse over time. So I think people have excused it by, oh, well, he played too many minutes and et cetera. And, once the minutes go down, his injuries would just go away. But I mean, undersized point guards, man, I tell you, there's not a lot of, people talk about Victor Wembanyama being injury prone before he's even had a serious injury. I'm telling you, like, undersized point guards who don't have great athletic bursts do not have great shelf lives beyond the age of 30. So, do you want to be holding the bag when he falls? I mean, look at what the Celtics just did with Marcus Smart. They got one bad season from him and he was gone. Like, he was out. They're not waiting for him to fall off a cliff next year. And I mean, Marcus Smart is a guy who plays balls out. His body is taking a tremendous toll from all the defense he's played. Fred too, man. So look, like, I happen to know I'm not say off the record, I'm saying it into a live, that the Raptors were not thrilled about the contract that they had to give DeMar DeRozan. And you noticed that they pretty much traded him 1 year into that contract to San Antonio. So I think they have a similar sentiment about Pascal Siakam. I don't think they're just super happy about the concept of having to pay him nearly $50 million to stay around. And especially what that might mean for their ability to sign OG and build a competitive roster around Scotty and OG would be interesting. So I don't think he'll be here for 3 years. I just think you just need to retain the asset and then move it. So, whether that means you trade it for the next time, somebody else comes up, or you package a pick with it, not that you really can. You won't really be able to package a pick until you convey 2024's pick. But I mean, it's a movable deal. Deals worse than that have been moved. Fred's still a very, apparently, we have to believe, according to reports, that Fred VanVleet is a very sought out and very well respected, free agent. A lot of free agency guides and stuff have him as a, top 5, top 6 type of free agent this year. So the illusion of Fred VanVleet, the reputation of Fred VanVleet outside the Raptors fan base is still that this is a guy who should be starting in the NBA as one of the 3 best players on a decent team. And I think that those guys typically tend to get paid over $25 million. Fred hits back-to-back threes. Siakam can't even make free throws. Fred is clutch. Siakam isn't. Fred is considerably more clutch than Siakam. I think Fred being called clutch is a little bit disingenuous. Scotty's clutch, Gary's clutch, and OG's clutch. Those are the 3 most clutch players in your starting lineup. Anyway, y'all, take care. Have a good one. Sorry for the low energy on this one. I am exhausted after a 6-hour live. I just, I know people are going to wake up tomorrow and be like, what did Rob think about the Gradey Dick pick? And I just, that's just such an awkward statement. The Gradey Dick pick. Shit. This is going to take some adjusting too, guys. But I didn't want them to have to scroll through that 6-hour live and then just see me kind of holding my head down and feel like this pick is not what it is. Because look, I had this frustration with people who covered the Scotty draft, and they just went with this, oh, he's a no-level scorer, he's this, he's that, and it's all misinformation. So I just wanted to offer a hopefully more informed, hopefully more balanced perspective on Gradey. All right. Seriously, get some sleep. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I will definitely get some sleep. Take care, guys. Have a good one.